In the room where we boys used to sleep, there hung a skeleton. At night, the wind would make its bones rattle against each other. During the day, we would poke at its ribs. Our teacher taught us osteology using those bones. But even then, we knew that the skeleton had once belonged to a living person. Years later, due to a lack of space, I had to sleep in that very room. One night, as the moonlight fell on the floor and the clock struck 1, I couldn't sleep. Suddenly, I felt as if someone was moving around the room. I heard the sound of footsteps and the rustle of a silk sari. I sat up and asked, "Who is it?"
A voice replied, "It is I. Where is my skeleton?"
I realized it was the ghost of the woman whose bones used to hang on the wall. I asked her to sit down and tell me her story. To my surprise, she sat on the edge of my bed and began to speak.
"When I was alive," she said, "I was considered the most beautiful woman in my village. You see these bones now, but once they were covered in firm, youthful flesh. My eyes were deep and dark, and my smile could win over any heart. I was married young, but my husband died soon after. I became a widow, and in our society, a widow's life is a living death."
She told me how she returned to her brother's house. She was young, full of life, and craving love. But she was forced to live a life of renunciation, wearing plain white clothes and eating only once a day. Then, she continued,
"A doctor came to live in our neighborhood. He was handsome and kind. For the first time, I felt the fire of desire. I would watch him from behind the curtains, and sometimes our eyes would meet. I began to imagine a life with him, a life of freedom and love. But I knew it was impossible. I was a widow, a pure thing that was meant to remain untouched."
The ghost's voice grew bitter.
One day, I discovered that the doctor was to be married to a young girl from a wealthy family. The news broke something inside me. I realized that my beauty was a curse, a cage that kept me trapped while the world moved on. On the night of his wedding, I took poison. I wanted to die while I was still beautiful, before age or grief could wither me.
She paused, and I could almost feel her ethereal presence shivering. "But look at the irony," she whispered.
After I died, my body didn't turn to dust in a funeral pyre. Instead, it was handed over to a morgue, then to a medical college, and finally, my bones were cleaned and wired together to become a teaching tool for schoolboys. My beauty, which I cherished so much, was stripped away until only these cold, hard bones remained. You boys laughed at my ribs, never knowing they once housed a heart that broke from longing.
As the first light of dawn began to creep into the room, the voice grew fainter.
"Now you know," she said. "The skeleton is not just a collection of bones. It is the remains of a life that was never allowed to be lived."
The morning sun hit the spot where she had been sitting, and there was nothing there but the empty air. The skeleton still hung on the wall, silent and still, but I could never look at it the same way again.